Okay, it's 2 minutes after 12. Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks to all of you who are on the line. It's great to have you with us. We're excited to be here today and sharing the Sonoma County Food Action Plan. This was an additional Salon that we added in just because of the interest across the network in the Food Action Plan. We have a small team of Sonoma County members and staff who are with us today to share the plan. So thanks to all of them for joining us, and again, thanks to all of you for being with us as well. I just wanted to give a little background and a reminder on the Salon series itself. Ag Innovations this year has started a Salon series as part of our network services to connect members across the Alliance network from various food system alliances. The goal really being for Alliance members to be able to learn and also share information with each other about the work that they're doing across the state. So we hope in that effort that this Salon is both informative, that it is informative for everyone to bring some information back to their alliances in terms of the possibility of food action plans or something along that line. So in terms of what we'll cover today regarding the Food Action Plan, in a moment I'll introduce you to everyone who's on the line with us today, and we'll talk about the path to the Food Action Plan, what that looks like. We'll talk about the Food Action Plan itself, what it's comprised of, and the process that the Sonoma County Food System Alliance is in now of implementing the Food Action Plan. And then from all of those pieces, we'll do a little take on lessons learned. And then we'll have about 20 or 25 minutes to do a question and answer period. And we really invite you to chime in. So on the line today are two Food System Alliance members. One is Fina Borgeson, and Fina is an Episcopal deacon with the Interfaith Sustainable Food Collaborative, and she is a founding member of the Sonoma County Food System Alliance. So both she and our other guest, Tanya Nereth, have been part of the Food System Alliance since inception. Tanya is the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute for Ecology and the Economy. So thanks to you both for being with us today. We also have three staffers, if you will, on the line. Jana Hill, she works for the Department of Health Services and has also been a part of the Sonoma County Food System Alliance from its beginning and a part of rolling out the Food Action Plan. We have Lisa Badenfort. She is the coordinator for Sonoma County Food System Alliance. She is a full-time coordinator and currently our only full-time coordinator in any of our Alliance programs. She started in February of this year with the group. And you're hearing me, Katie Pease, speaking. I'm a new facilitator in Sonoma County, and I also facilitate in Fresno, San Diego, and Contra Costa counties. So thanks again, team, for being here. And without further ado, I'm actually going to send this over to Jana.
Great, thank you, Katie. So I am charged with talking to everyone about the path to the Food Action Plan. And the slide you're seeing now provides an overall timeline that will go into more detail in the next slides coming up. But really what this slide shows is that it wasn't the quickest process. And so if any of you embark on this, just have patience with it. And it took us a lot of steps to get here. And so in the next slides, we'll go through each of these processes. But we really started in 2009 and are now where we are with the Food Action Plan. So how it started, just to give a little background, I won't go into too much detail, is that in Sonoma County there was a lot of board our Board of Supervisors are really interested in health action, which was a council developed with a big cross-section group of folks at the executive level across business, health, nonprofits in the county. There's about 40 members and they solidified a vision for Sonoma County that by the year 2020, we would love to be the healthiest county in California. And in that vision, they identified 10 goals, and these were goals developed with the community. And one, which is highlighted here, is really about eating healthy food, which is a broad goal. And then another one, that's goal number 2, is looking at economic resources to make ends meet. And so through these goals, we developed the Food System Alliance to really focus on the eat healthy food, and that we needed a cross-section of folks across the food system to really look at how does the food system work to get us to that goal to eat healthy food, that when you look at healthy food, it's not an isolation of all the other systematic efforts of the food system locally and regionally. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, the Food System Alliance was born, and what happened really initially was 2 of our Board of Supervisors members really wanted a kind of food forum. Like, let's get the community together, let's talk about food, let's talk about agriculture. There seems to be a lot of interest, and so as staff at the county, we were charged with helping move that forward, and we co-hosted an event with the Food System Alliance, the board, the Health Services Department, us, and Cooperative Extension, and really looking across all the assets across the food system. We thought maybe we would get 100 people at the time, and we actually had a lot more interest and had over 300 attendees at the event. And it was structured to be, there were a number of interactive panels, and then really to get the people in the room coming up with key recommendations. Given that we had all these great people in the room, what did they see for the food system? So we did a lot of World Cafe efforts to get recommendations from the people in the room so we could actually hear the voice and use that in our planning efforts. Outside of that, we synthesized all the sticky wall material, which Fina and Tanya were part of, and 11 key recommendations emerged. And out of that, we came to really looking at the development of the Food Action Plan. We went back to the Board of Supervisors with a report on the Food Forum and looked at the key recommendations, and out of that, we decided what do we need to do, and I'll talk a little bit about this towards the end of my section as well. So the next slide outlines, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but just the recommendations that came out of the Food Forum with those 300+ participants. And as you'll see, Lisa was kind enough to highlight the main points in each recommendation, but we've carried a lot of these recommendations forward in our planning efforts and in a way to really take what the community told us to move into how are we going to look at the food system and look at all the issues that surround the food system and how to make a viable food system in Sonoma County. Around the same time, and actually before, we had a committee looking at a community food assessment. And so there was a lot of interest on what's our baseline data? What do we know about the food system in Sonoma County? How do we even know what we want to change? And there was a group of volunteers, which in retrospect was pretty amazing, that did the research and crafted the material to develop the first ever community food assessment for our county. And I say it's pretty amazing because a lot of people contract out for this, and we had a committee of about 4 people drafting the items and drafting the content and developing, I think it's about an 80-page assessment for our county. What came out of it were next steps and areas of need, so I identified kind of where we are at a baseline across a number of goals in the food system and where do we need some improvement. And so it gave us a benchmark of our food system as of July 2011 and gave us some direction on where we need to do some more work. Next slide, please. So the Food Action Plan actually came out of a conversation. We had a policy committee with the Food System Alliance, and we were deciding, what do? We have these recommendations that came out of our food forum. We have a community food assessment that identified some gaps and areas where we need some improvement. And from a policy committee perspective, we could either identify one unique policy or 1 or 2 unique policies that we really want to drive forward, Or on the other end of the spectrum, we could develop a comprehensive plan that includes everything and use it a bit of as a roadmap moving forward and get some consensus on where we want to see the food system over time. And so after a lot of discussion, we landed from a policy committee perspective on the larger vision. And actually, we took a model out of Multnomah County and Portland, Oregon area to work with. And so it was a large partnership with DHS, the policy committee, and the Alliance that kind of reviewed the direction and reviewed the movement of the Food Action Plan. So we spent a lot of time drafting the Food Action Plan. And there's a lot of different ways to slice the food system and to put it in a two-dimensional document. It causes some struggles, but we figured out how to make it work as best as we could. And Fina will talk about a little bit more about that moving forward. But we also wanted to make sure we got stakeholder review. So based on the attendees at the food forum and some other important stakeholders, we wanted to make sure they looked at drafts of the Food Action Plan, provided feedback, and we incorporated their feedback moving forward. Next slide, please. So after quite a while, over a year of drafting and reworking this document, we brought it to our Sonoma County Board of Supervisors in October 2012, and we did it strategically to coincide with Food Day. And our board adopted the guide as really a vision for our local food system moving forward and as a planning tool, not only for our community, but also for us as the county to try and draw down some funds to move the goals in the future. And I think at this point, I'm going to pitch it over to Fina to talk about really what is the Food Action Plan and to go into more detail of what the purpose and the vision is for it.
Okay, what is the Food Action Plan? One of my things is I hope that you all can read this and I don't have to focus on every detail, but it seems to me that the purposes of the Food Action Plan are many, and yet the main thing is that it's a gathering of so many pieces of vision, pieces of action, pieces of hope in the community, but it also provides a whole, a systemic view of our local food system so that the whole can have some influence on the parts as individuals find a place where they can get a hold of this, where they see a roadmap, where they feel invited to build on things that their organization is doing or wants to do, where they find equipment here in the toolkit to support them in their work. Next slide, please. One of the challenges was how to organize the Food Action Plan. For one thing, how much to include about some of the causal factors that affect people's ability to purchase healthful food for themselves and their families. And we had quite a lot of challenges about that. But we ended up with 4 pillars of the Food Action Plan. And I think it's fairly obvious what they are: agriculture and natural resources. We'll see some more data on that, but it's basically the whole area of our local agriculture and how that impacts our environment. Economic vitality, thinking about food businesses, local food, how that affects the economy. Healthy eating, or healthful eating as I would prefer, is really has 2 dimensions. One is health, and the other is access. Obviously, they're closely related, but there's some justice issues in terms of access incorporated in that one. And then many more justice issues in social equity, where we talk about people who are working in the food system and so on, and their ability to make a living doing that, and so that they have access to healthful food. One thing that we found is a continuing challenge is when you have 4 pillars, you must be very careful that they don't become 4 silos. Next slide, please. So here's more detail about what the 4 pillars focus on. And I think there's also another slide that includes all the goals. So this is somewhat some of this detail is maybe not necessary, but if you're interested, those of you who are participating in a particular area, take a quick read of that one now. I think each of these 4 areas has its own challenges in terms of bringing together people who will work on each of these 4 areas, which is what the pillar groups are trying to do, but there's more about that in implementation. How about the next slide? What makes the food action plan accessible? This is very important to me because I do a lot of teaching, and one of the things I've learned is that different things, different ways of expressing things appeal to different people. Some people are really energized by the goals, by the clear statement of the goals, and then some of the sub-goals under the plan. I've just lost the slide, but I have some notes here, so I guess I can do this. So some people resonate to goals, but other people want to talk about want specifics. So, for example, the section in the food action plan that covers sample programs is particularly important for people who say, "Give me something. Don't give me a goal. Give me something concrete." There are those who watch a policy, watch progress, and for them, the section on the indicators of what would be a progress in each of the goals is really, really important. So there's a place in the food action plan for everybody to jump in. And I'm doing this from memory now because I just lost the webinar. I'm hoping I can get it back. But the next slide is the 11 goals enumerated. And let's just take a minute so you can take a look at these. One thing I realized when I was reviewing this material is we somehow had 11 recommendations from the Food Forum, and then we have 11 goals. And I don't think that they correlate at all. I think this is just the challenge that we have of when somebody tells us, what are your top 10? We never can limit it to the top 10. So we seem to have 11 of everything. But I found that kind of amusing. I cannot see the 11 goals at this point, sorry to say. So I don't know what to do to enumerate this. Would somebody else pick that up and review them? And then I believe I'm done. So.
This is Jana. I'll just pick up where Fina is and pitch it back over to Tanya. And sorry, Fina, you can't see those. And for those reading on the screen, they're spelled out, and so there's a lot of sub-goals underneath each goals, and while it looks like, oh, we just have 11 goals, there's quite a few sub-goals, and it's a pretty broad plan, which we'll talk about kind of in our lessons learned section. But as you can see, they're truncated into ag and natural resources, economic vitality, healthy eating, and social equity. And there's more goals in some than other, and that, again, as Fina alluded to, it's just our decision process and how do we limit stuff and how do we be inclusive and how do we go about making that decision as well. So on Fina's behalf, Tanya is going to talk more about how does the implementation actually take place.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. And I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the implementation piece, as Jana said. And on this slide, starting out, really just want to talk for a few minutes about who is doing this work. And I think as you recall from the beginning of the presentation where Jana showed the timeline and the number of years that it's taken us to reach this point, as you can imagine, it's taken a lot of collaborative effort from a broad group of stakeholders. And so we currently have 27 members in the Alliance. And as part of our moving from the planning that we've been working into more of an action phase, we took a hard look at the membership requirements and have really been encouraging members to be actively engaged in this whole process. It's really important and critical for us to be able to move ahead. And so we actually did a revision on our charter. We looked back at our membership requirements and tried to spell out more clearly how Alliance members could be involved in this process. And so, for example, we have requirements around number of meetings to attend. We ask folks to actively participate on at least one food action plan pillar team and or committee, we ask folks to be champions of the Food Action Plan and the Alliance. And I'll talk a bit more about the implementation steps that we're taking in a minute. Let's see, we have the AIN team that's been critical to our success, having some staff support to kind of carry the foundation, build the foundation for us has been really important, and also the support of our partners at the Department of Health Services and the County of Sonoma. We have a couple of standing entities that have been supporting this work as well. What we call our coordinating committee, which started out as a process committee, and this is really the group that outside of our regular monthly meetings takes a look at future meeting agendas, looks at how we can improve our meetings because we want to make sure that they're as valuable and impactful for members as possible, so people want to come to meetings. So we're looking at those sorts of things. We look at emerging issues and how to plug them into our schedule. We have a lot that we want to talk about and cover in each meeting, and so we really try and phase that out over time. We have a Farm to Institution Committee, which has been kind of a natural group that came together because it was an issue or an area where there was a clear need. There was an opportunity where institutions, primarily schools, really wanted to connect up with local farmers, and so it's been a really important committee for us. And then finally, in terms of the Food Action Plan, we have what we call the pillar teams, which are a team for each of the 4 areas that Fina went through earlier, so ag and natural resources, economic vitality, healthy eating, and social equity. So next slide, please. In terms of our implementation approach for the plan, we've really divided our effort into 2 major areas, the pillar teams and convenings and an endorsement effort. And so I'll talk first about the pillar teams and convenings. And you'll see there on your slide that we have the 4 pillars and then the activities that have been taking place in each of the pillars. And we've really placed a high priority on how we can move into action in the most effective way. And we started out this process thinking that in each of the pillar teams, we would choose a goal or several goals that the group would work on in the year. And back to Jana's comments, when you look at the Food Action Plan, you'll see that there's a lot of stuff that we could work on. So we spent some time at the very beginning trying to prioritize and think about what are the most important goals for us to work on in the coming year or years ahead. And initially we thought that in each of the pillars, we would start out by hosting a forum, not necessarily as big as the first food forum, but it would be a way to engage a broader group of stakeholders in learning more about the particular pillar and goal or goals that we had chosen. And our second intention with these forums was to actually form an action team or teams to then go to work and take action on the particular goal or sub-goal. What we found as we started working through the process in each of the pillar teams is that that approach didn't necessarily fit well with what we saw as being needed in the particular area. So in the Ag and Natural Resources pillar, for example, we haven't yet done a forum. There may be one that happens, but the team is focusing in on the goal of ag land preservation, urban ag zones, and agricultural easements, and looking at other ways of working with the local stakeholders to make progress on those issues. The healthy eating pillar, on the other hand, did find that doing a forum would be helpful, and so they organized a forum, and I don't recall the number of people there. It was less than the food forum, but still a pretty large group. I want to say about 100 people, and out of that they formed a healthy eating action team, and now we're looking at healthy retail opportunities. So they kind of followed the original approach that we had set out for ourselves. In the economic vitality group, they actually found an opportunity to partner with another group that was planning a conference called the Invest Local Conference, and it fit right in with what the group was wanting to do around increasing the purchase of local food in the community. And so they partnered and did a workshop as part of that conference. So it not only helped the group attract a broader audience, it lessened the amount of work that was required from a Food Systems Alliance perspective, so it was a real win-win. And coming up this spring, they're looking at a similar approach, partnering with our Sustainable Enterprise Conference to offer workshops and discussions during that particular forum. And then finally, on the social equity pillar, we've been spending a lot, and I'm a member of that forum planning team or pillar team. We've been looking at, again, what is the best way to help advance the goals under the social equity pillar and have found that there's some great work going on within the Department of Health Services at the county level to produce what's called the Portrait of Sonoma County, which will be a very detailed report looking at indicators of social equity in our community around health, income, and education. And so we decided that it didn't make sense for us to embark on a separate effort. We want to see what comes out of this Portrait of Sonoma County, as well as some interviews and survey that's being done of local farm workers. And once we have that data, then we'll look at what is the best next step for us as a group. So as you can see, there's been a variety of approaches to addressing the goals under the pillar teams. And the other theme I'd like to just touch upon in the pillar team area is that we've also really been doing a lot of collaboration. And I would say that's a critical piece of our success, both in getting to where we are today as well as moving forward, is we've really done a lot to reach out and involve stakeholders beyond the Core Food Systems Alliance, which kind of leads into the right-hand side of the slide, which is the endorsement effort. And this is one of those situations where for quite a while now, we've known that this is important to our effort. It's something that we've talked about wanting to do, build a list of individuals and organizations that will endorse the Food Action Plan. But it's a little bit like knowing that you need to eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, but how many of us are actually doing that? So it's like one of those things we know is important, but it's been hard for us to really prioritize and put time into it. We have tried to make the Food Action Plan very accessible, as I think Fina touched upon earlier. And while we would love for everyone to endorse the whole plan, we've made it possible and hopefully fairly straightforward for folks to endorse a pillar, multiple pillars, goals under the pillars, really whatever resonates and is important to the folks that we're approaching to endorse. We want to make it possible for them to endorse at least a portion of the Food Action Plan. As a way of really helping ourselves make progress in getting more endorsements in 2014, we've set goals for ourselves. We want to have a total of 1,000 individuals and 100 organizations signed up as endorsers by the end of the year. And we also want to approach at least 2 cities in the coming year to sign on as endorsers of the plan. And then, of course, individuals, organizations, and other municipalities will be approaching as well. So next slide, please. How to engage with the FAP, kind of tying into my comments and Fina's comments about wanting to make it accessible. We've really included pieces in the plan that we hope will spur engagement at many different levels. So if you look at the plan, you'll see that there's some sections that talk about what can I do as an individual to improve the system in Sonoma County, what can my organization do, what can I do as a private business. And then we have multiple ways that we're calling people to action, from supporting the vision all the way to changing your own practices, purchasing decisions, funding, et cetera. So we really want this to be something that's not just a report on a shelf. We're using it to guide and make action happen. Next slide, please. So a really important part of the implementation is our communications about the plan. We want to get the word out about the plan in as many different ways as we can. So we're very excited that we have a new website that will allow us to track the Food Action Plan data, to gather endorsements, to really act as a hub for information about the food system and the actions that are being taken. We're working on a newsletter in partnership with our Go Local organization. And finally, we're looking at ways that we can strategically attend local events, get information out about the food system, and do all of this while keeping our mostly volunteer group of members really engaged and making it possible. And next slide. In terms of accomplishments, this is my last slide before I turn it over to Lisa. We feel like we have done a lot in the past year. It's been a very exciting year. It's really been a year where we've transitioned from the planning process to a very action-oriented phase, which is exciting for all of us as members. We've worked hard to continue growing and expanding our membership to make sure that we're representing all of the stakeholders in the food system. And while we still have some gaps, I think we've made a great progress. And what we find is that people really want to be involved. And so, again, back to making the Food Action Plan accessible, we really try not to limit people. If they're not able to be a full member of the Alliance, participate on a committee or help us and get endorsements or help us with a particular piece of a plan, really making it as accessible as possible. The endorsement strategy, we have a good foundation in place. We have the tools that we need. We have, from our last meeting, we have new commitments and accountability to actually reach the goals that I shared. So we have a good foundation in place for this next year. And I mentioned the Food Action Plan website, big communications step forward. The multiple events that we either organized or had a big role in making happen in the last year. So it's been a great year, and we're looking forward to much more happening in 2014. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, can we hear me? I'm not sure. Hello?
I can hear you.
Wonderful, okay. Hello, everybody. I am the coordinator for this fantastic group of Alliance members. I know that we're running a bit short on time, so I'll make it very brief. I went ahead and broke out a few of the lessons learned throughout these 3 different subjects, really throughout our model and process, planning and action, and how we organize as an alliance. So we can go ahead and to the next slide. And there we go. The Food Action Plan, it says so much for the Alliance model itself, that it was so successful in actually establishing a county-wide vision for a healthy food system that hadn't really existed before. And so now individuals, organizations, and governments actually do have a framework for our local food system to organize around and to really use as a planning tool. Again, with the model itself, the multi-stakeholder alliance model was very, very successful in bringing forward the system-level input and the system-level leadership that would be needed to build a system-level plan. So the Food Action Plan process and the document has been really successful in also building a broad coalition of food system leaders out in the community just by very nature of how the Alliance operates. And again, the democratic nature of the Alliance model in turn continue to boost that community engagement, whether it's through our planning process or through our projects that our pillar teams are doing, and really increases representativeness all around, which is how we all would hope that we could build local plans and local actions. Next slide. Capacity, of course, always a consideration when embarking on any project that we do. With the Food Action Plan specifically, the Alliance found it really critical to take the time to consider what is the capacity and what are the expectations of the group, and how do we work to align those as realistically as possible. The planning and implementation timeline is much longer with the Food Action Plan than most other traditional Alliance projects. So we would suggest alliances really be prepared for what could appear to be a delayed planning timeline or delayed action. And also because the project was such a hefty undertaking that really ensuring strong leadership throughout is really, really key. So as we moved out into our pillar teams, into our endorsement effort, how do we make sure that we build in some leadership through the Alliance membership themselves to carry out, to lead those teams throughout. Another note here is on membership itself. As alliances, of course, there's a natural ebb and flow of membership, but we're in the midst of this very long-term and complex project. We also found it very important to ensure that the new members were really well-oriented to not only how the alliances work, but also what the Food Action Plan implementation phase is about and how they can essentially plug in to this enormous project that really is already underway. The other planning suggestions around clarity, again, because of the longer planning horizon, the implementation may indeed take a lot longer than many might expect, which can sometimes lead to a bit of either disappointment, sometimes a sense of slowing down. So as much clarity around expectations on timelines as alliances can identify is great. And also, the facilitation team actually, we sat down and really looked at really recommending to alliances that they build in regular check-in points throughout the year so that members are able to assess and adjust in a good way, and that we as their staff are able to really support them in a good way and have a mechanism to be able to touch base on what the plans are and how they're moving forward throughout the year. And finally, with the implementation phase, the creation of those pillar teams was, of course, necessary and a really strong piece of the implementation plan, and needed to focus more specifically on projects and events planning. So, however, for several months, the pillar teams were working really hard on multiple projects, and the cohesion and communication and some of the decision-making of the actual core of the alliance was a bit impaired. Some of the energy was lost, and a good amount of confusion somewhat kind of resulted throughout the alliance, where there was a lot of disconnect between the teams and the core and the committees and from the institution. So really in early 2014, we've been working really hard to bring that core back together and to try and make more of the planning decisions kind of at the group level. Similarly, some of the pillar teams were really embarking on some really challenging projects that were a bit more challenging than originally anticipated. So by nature, the issues and opportunities that the Food Action Plan addresses are really long-standing, complex issues that have been challenging for decades. So the need to really remain attentive to our community stakeholders and to learn what's really needed in our community really required much flexibility from members and on expectations and on our planning phase altogether. So the pillar team projects require many meetings outside with leaders in the community, a lot of creativity, and above all else, a real need to kind of remain flexible on all fronts. And I will go ahead and stop there since we're over time. I think Katie will take it from here.
Yes. So thank you, Fina and Tanya and Jana and Lisa. It's always really exciting to hear yet again another overview of the Food Action Plan. It re-engages and re-energizes every time for me anyway, and I hope that all of you took some of that away from this presentation as well. We want to turn now to opening up the floor to those of you on the call who might have questions for our members and staff about the Food Action Plan and any of the things that you've heard about through this presentation or otherwise, anything that comes to mind that you've been carrying with you perhaps about the Food Action Plan. On my dashboard, I can see if you raise your hands, if there's anyone who has a question, now would be a great time to bring it forward. Okay, I don't see anyone raising hands. I've also asked of our member panelists if there are any questions on their side, kind of going back to the alliances or those on the call around what their alliances might be working on similar to or in an effort toward a food action plan. So I'll open it up kind of the other way around as well. Is there anyone of the panelists that might have a question going the other way?
Lisa here. I do. I am infinitely curious about other alliances and other projects. For example, one of our other alliances recently produced an incredible community food assessment. And so I'm always curious what kind of actions the other alliances are taking, if any of the alliances have ever ventured into thinking about a food action plan, and other ways that they just engage with their community. Very curious.
Thanks, Lisa. Is there anyone on the line who would like to answer, has an answer to that? It would be great to hear from some of you from the other alliances around. Perhaps I could call on someone. Richard, you're from the San Mateo Food System Alliance, I believe. What is your alliance working on, and have you guys discussed at all a food action plan? Richard, are you on the line?
Well, I could hear him for a minute.
Yeah, he must have chimed out. Okay, let's try again. How about Gretchen? Gretchen, we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, but is there, could you tell us what alliance you're from and what your alliance might be working on toward what it's working on in general?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
super. I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm the editor of the Made Local magazine. You showed it briefly, but I don't think that the speaker mentioned. Yeah, hi. I don't think the speaker had a chance to mention that the entire genesis of Made Local magazine is the Food Action Plan. That's the reason we're putting out a bi-monthly publication, is to support and expand upon the ideas set forth in the Food Action Plan. And to tell the stories behind it, because for those of us outside your world, it's a tough read. But the stories and the people and the artisans and the producers and the technologists and the farmers and ranchers are fascinating. And there's so many wonderful stories to tell in Sonoma County. And the Food Action Plan is a wonderful umbrella for us to gather under and really try to share with the community the importance of the 4 pillars and the ideas outlined in the plan. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Gretchen. And could you tell us just a little bit more about the partnership, too, between Go Local now and the Food System Alliance? Or in essence, sort of what is the media that Go Local is putting out? How are you putting out the stories that you're mentioning? And then how are you working with the Food System Alliance to do that?
So just to clarify, I'm a freelancer. I'm not affiliated with the Go Local campaign other than to serve as editor for the magazine that they publish. So I can't speak to all of that regarding the relationship. If I understand correctly, you're asking what the Made Local magazine is. A bi-monthly. We launched in November of last year. We did take just after Christmas off. So our newest issue was published yesterday. And that's available at all local, independently owned grocery stores here in the county, as well as the Copperfields books. It's supported by advertising, like the alternative news weeklies, like the Bohemian, where I used to be the editor for 8 years, and like the Bohemian in particular. There's a very strict wall between advertising and editorial, so we really do produce a quality product that is free from considerations about who's helping to support it financially. And we're a going concern. I mean, we're looking to be at least 5 times a year and come out the end. So our next issue will be the end of April, and issue after that end of June, and so on, every 2 months. And there is a web component to it as well. If you went to madelocal.coop, COOP, you would be able to find the magazine online there if you're not able to stop by a local store.
Great, thanks, Gretchen.
Sure.
So you can see also why it's a great partnership for the Food System Alliance to be working with Go Local. One, as Gretchen mentioned, that all the stories are kind of coming out of the partnerships and stories through the Alliance. And the other is just really sharing those stories to a broader network. So it's been an exciting kind of new communications tool that the Alliance has really been able to take advantage of and work with, and that's been an exciting next step. So I'll just go ahead and open it up one more time, and if anybody's had any questions come to mind while we've been. It looks like we have one question here. Katie, please go ahead.
Yes. Well, I'm really curious to hear just a little bit more from your experience, the panelists, with the Food Action Plan. I know this has been, first effort to do kind of a longer-term planning process, and a couple of you spoke to that. I just would love to hear your reflections on the difference that you experienced doing, a brief planning process or an annual planning process in your alliance about actions to be taken, and then shifting to this longer-term action plan, just to maybe say a little bit more about what that was like. and maybe some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks of that shift that you've experienced?
This is Fina. I'm happy to speak to that. I would want to use the F word, frustration. I mean, I was on the policy committee, and I think about the times that we had to labor over something and then take it to the full alliance and go round and round and then go back to the table. I mean, there is a lot of frustration in it. On the other hand, in the process of that frustration, our knowledge of the food system as a whole, not just the little pieces that each one of us might be particularly interested in, but our knowledge of the food system as a whole is increased, and our relationships with one another are strengthened. So there's a real balance there, I think, between, and I suspect that we lost a few people along the way in the alliance because of the frustration level, but those of us who've hung in there and some of the newer people who've joined us are very appreciative of what we've been able to do in terms of having a big picture of our county food system and having strong relationships now to do this implementation phase.
Thank you. This is Jana from the Health Department. I would just dovetail that. I completely underscore the frustration part. I helped pull that committee together, and by the end, I think I over-committed them, but it was well worth the effort. And then I think from the process part to more the implementation part, I think it's been a challenge for us to figure out how do we translate this really broad document into action, and what's a suitable action for the Alliance to take versus other entities or organizations, and where can we really plug in. And so I think that was reflected in what Tanya was talking about with the forum planning teams, and how do we actually take this document and make it into action and feel like we're moving towards something as a coalition. So that's been something I think we've struggled with and continue to struggle with, and something we're learning about as we move forward, and how do we be really concrete and get the right people in the room instead of just a big bucket of people coming together and then not knowing how to move forward. So
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Katie, this is Jana again. I just want to add something, if you don't mind. From the health department perspective, and I would imagine from other organizational perspectives, we've actually used the Food Action Plan to drive our funding. So as we look for grants, we've looked at the goals and figured out, what do we not have funding to really work with. We applied for a community transformation grant and used a lot of the goals in the Food Action Plan to invest some of that community transformation money. And so we've actually been trying to use it as a grant development process instead of chasing money, really looking at to align grants and strategically apply for grants. So that's helped us from a health department and county perspective.
Great.
I can ditto that this is Fina again, from the perspective, it says Lisa's talking because Lisa phoned me in. Anyway, just my little gleaning project that I run in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley, it felt good to strengthen the mini grant I applied for by saying this correlates with goals such and such, I can't remember the number, in the Sonoma County Food Action Plan, because it's a strengthening thing for any of us in any of our projects to have an official document there where we can point to how our piece of the work relates to this, but we can also show that our piece of the work is part of a system-wide approach to strengthening the food system where we are. So I think it's very valuable in that way.
And this is Tanya. I would also add from my organization's perspective, we do a leadership training program that educates local community members and leaders about sustainability and the importance of changing public policy to support more sustainable practices. And the Food Action Plan for our program has also been very helpful in terms of giving us a framework when we look at food system issues and policies, that we go right to the plan. And we actually had a speaker on the plan in one of our class days, and because it looks at the different facets of the food system, from the environment, the economy, and the social equity lens, it's really been invaluable from an education standpoint as well.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and close things up. I'll just offer one more time if there's any other comments from those on the line, whether that's the presenters or folks with questions, members of other alliances. Okay, doesn't look like it. So I want to say thanks again to our presenters and the members of the Sonoma County Food System Alliance for being on the call. It's really been informative to hear about how the Sonoma County Food Action Plan has really brought together various aspects of work in the county and ideas around food systems into a document that's really become a guiding document kind of county-wide for lots of various stakeholders and stakeholder groups. And then just really the strong relationships that are being built out of that. It's really a pleasure to be a part of that process now as the facilitator of the Sonoma County group, and I really look forward to seeing where this all leads into the future and how we really get, continue to get and build enthusiasm, kind of the boots on the ground enthusiasm across the county for really unraveling this plan. So thanks again to Fina and Tanya and Jana and Lisa. Really appreciate your contributions today to the Salon. And thanks again to all of those who have joined in. Just a quick reminder before I close the call, our next Salon is on March 11th, and we're going to be focusing on the California drought. We have the CDFA Undersecretary Sandy Schubert, who's going to be joining us and talking about implications of the drought statewide, as well as kind of policy solutions that are being put into place for that. We're also going to compile a nice list of resources if you have further inclination for research and such that we'll make available to you after that call. So we hope that those of you on the call will be able to join us for that March 11th webinar as well. It will also be from 12 to 1. They'll always be in that time frame. Thanks everyone, and hope to talk to you again.